Hey guys, before we begin, take a few seconds to prepare your mind. What you are about to hear is not a challenge video, not a prank, and not a rejected Netflix script. This is real. The reality that makes you stare at history and ask, how did humanity survive this phase? Today, we are walking through moments when people looked directly at the reasonable option and calmly chose the one that would make every history teacher file for early retirement. These are decisions so baffling that you start questioning whether logic ever existed. If you are working, keep working. If you are lying down, stay exactly where you are. And if you are holding a cup of coffee, friendly warning, do not aim your screen at splash range. If you enjoy chaotic but oddly satisfying storytelling, hit subscribe. You will need it for the next chapters. All right, let's go. 1. In 1995, Wheeler decided to rob a bank. No mask, no backup plan, just a fierce belief that lemon juice would make him invisible on camera. He had heard of invisible ink, and his brain interpreted that in a very personal, very misguided way. He rubbed lemon juice all over his face like he was preparing for a minimalist costume party, then walked into the bank, stared straight at the security camera as if posing for the amateur criminal yearbook, took the money, and walked out. Police caught him the same day. When they showed him the footage, Wheeler looked betrayed, stunned that the universe had turned against him. His iconic line, "But I wore the lemon juice." That was the moment every chemist in America reconsidered their career choices. And that was only the warm-up. The next story is even harder to believe. 2. This story proves that technology is rarely the problem. The real problem is how humans treat technology like a best friend who knows everything except how to drive the car for you. Our main character was driving an RV on the highway. He turned on cruise control, and in his mind, cruise control was a full vacation mode. Not only maintaining speed, but also steering, watching traffic, and possibly brewing coffee if he asked politely enough. With that level of confidence, he stood up, left the driver's seat, and went to make himself a cup of coffee. No one was holding the wheel. No one was supervising. Just an RV cruising forward with a confidence it was never programmed to have. The outcome was predictable. The RV calmly drifted off the road as if testing out an alternative lifestyle. Surprisingly, the accident wasn't the dramatic part. The dramatic part was that he sued the manufacturer for not warning him that cruise control was not autopilot. The court did not hesitate. The technology was fine. Cruise control was fine. The only thing malfunctioning was human expectation. And this is only story number 2. 3. Some towns solve problems with funding. Some solve them with urban planning. And then there is Falciano del Masico in Italy, where the local government chose the boldest method possible. They banned dying. The reason was simple. The cemetery was full, and the new one wasn't ready. So they tackled the issue at the root in a way that made Europe both laugh and stare in confusion. Residents heard the announcement and immediately entered a state of emotional freefall. What happens if someone disobeys? What is the punishment for non-compliance? No one wanted to ask out loud, but everyone wondered whether the town planned to send fines, court summons, or simply file it as voluntary violation of existence. The surprising part was that the decree sparked national debate, not about feasibility, but about bravery. You have to be extremely confident in your administrative power to challenge the laws of biology and declare, no one is allowed to die here. In the end, nobody was punished. But for a brief moment, Falciano became the only place in Europe attempting to manage life by negotiating directly with death. 4. Rosie Ruiz is proof that sports cheating does not always fail because of technology. Sometimes it fails because the cheater forgets to prepare the basics. In 1980, she entered Boston Marathon history in a way no coach has ever dared to include in a training manual. She won. Her time was unbelievably fast. So fast that professional runners looked at each other like they were watching a sci-fi trailer. The problem appeared the moment she crossed the finish line. No sweat, no exhaustion, no posture of someone who had just run 26 miles. And when reporters asked her simple questions about pace or race strategy, she answered as if she had accidentally been dropped into the wrong exam. The investigation was immediate. She had only run the final stretch. For the rest, she took the subway, waited for the right moment, then slipped into the race pack like a friend who arrived late but wanted everyone to think she had been there all along. Her title was stripped. Race organizers tightened their oversight. And Rosie became the story people tell whenever someone believes they can outsmart one of the most disciplined sporting events on earth. This was not just cheating. This was the marathon equivalent of walking into the final round without studying the first half. 5. This is the kind of story artillery instructors use when teaching new recruits what never to do. In the late 19th century, an Austrian artilleryman was inspecting a cannon and made a decision no one had questioned before, but he somehow felt compelled to try. He put his entire head inside the barrel to get a better look. If GoPro had existed, this would be the #1 clip in every military safety course. He leaned in, focused, analyzing the barrel like he was diagnosing a clogged kitchen pipe. At that exact moment, his teammate pulled the firing mechanism. It was not intentional. It was one of those tragic moments when fate meets bad communication. The cannon recoiled, a blast thundered out, and the soldier was launched from the barrel like an uncontracted stuntman. At this point, you would think the story ends. It does not. The shell did not detonate. He survived. No broken neck, no memory loss. Just a very stunned expression because he had accidentally starred in the military version of This Is the Exit. If there were an award for surviving through mythological levels of luck, he would be the top contender, and the reason artillery manuals now include more than one safety paragraph. 6. This story proves that history does not always need conspiracies, villains, or political turmoil. Sometimes all it takes is a rainy day, an overly long speech, and a president determined to prove that the weather is merely a suggestion. In 1841, William Henry Harrison arrived at his inauguration with an iron will and a coat he had decided to leave at home. It was cold. Rain hit him directly in the face. Everyone hoped he would shorten his speech, but Harrison chose to demonstrate strength by delivering 2 full hours. This was not a speech. This was a vocal marathon. The audience stood shivering in the rain. Harrison continued unfazed, as if auditioning for the role of weatherproof hero. No hat, no gloves, no coat. Only confidence and enthusiasm far exceed the limits of the human immune system. The outcome surprised no one with medical training. He caught a severe chill and developed pneumonia. 30 days later, Harrison died, becoming the president with the shortest term in American history. If there is one lesson here, it is this. When cold weather tells you to wear a coat, wear a coat. History already ran the experiment for you, and the results were not encouraging. 7. Some mistakes cost you a few hours of redoing paperwork, and some mistakes convince an entire lake to remove itself from the map. The Lake Peigneur disaster belongs to the second category, and it began with one engineer confidently deciding that a 1-meter miscalculation was not worth worrying about. In 1980, a drilling crew beneath the lake was searching for a salt dome. The plan was simple, but the drill wandered 1 meter off target and punctured an empty chamber inside the salt mine. That was the moment Lake Peigneur changed careers from freshwater lake to the biggest drain in the American South. Water began swirling downward with enthusiasm. Trees slid into the vortex, boats vanished. An entire dock was swallowed as if gravity had issued a personal challenge. Within hours, the lake was gone. A huge section of land turned into a reverse waterfall pouring straight into the earth. The incredible part is that no one died. Residents and workers escaped before nature completed its live demonstration on why physics does not negotiate. And it all began with 1 meter of error. A measurement small enough to ignore, but powerful enough to make future engineers triple-check their blueprints before drilling. 8. Professional sports are built on moments of greatness. Then there are moments when an athlete creates history in a way that makes the entire team want to pretend they were not present. Jim Marshall fits squarely into the second group. In 1964, during a Vikings vs. 49ers game, Marshall recovered a fumble. It was the perfect setup for glory. He ran. The crowd screamed. Teammates signaled wildly. Opponents looked confused. Every clue was clear except one: direction. Marshall sprinted at full speed toward the end zone of his own team. He never looked back, never hesitated. It was peak athletic focus aimed at the wrong objective. When he reached the goal line, he threw the ball into the air like he had executed the perfect play. The celebration ended when the referee calmly awarded points to the other team. The stadium froze. Marshall stood there, having created one of the most unforgettable moments in sports, not because of skill, but because of commitment applied in the wrong direction. Although he went on to have a respected career, the wrong way run remains legendary proof that even elite athletes sometimes need a map. 9. Modern aviation has countless rules, not because airplanes are complicated, but because there will always be one passenger determined to test the limits of the crew's patience. The man who wanted to get some fresh air mid-flight is one of the finest examples. The flight was preparing for takeoff. Everyone was seated. Everyone except him felt the cabin air was slightly stale. Instead of adjusting the overhead vent like the rest of humanity, he chose a bold strategy. He stood up, walked to the emergency exit, and tried to open it to let natural wind inside. A flight attendant saw this and reacted with the reflexes of someone watching their career flash before their eyes. The door shifted, alarm sounded, and the aircraft halted its takeoff to handle the situation. Other passengers looked at the man as if he had attempted to open a submarine window underwater. The ending was predictable. He was escorted off the plane, fined, and became a case study in aviation safety training about why passengers should never adjust the airflow at 35,000 feet. Sometimes the cabin is fine. The real issue is the person sitting in it. 10. Some people lose their careers to injuries, some financial scandal. And then there is Donald Sterling, who proved you can destroy an entire fortune with nothing more than your own voice. Sterling, the owner of the LA Clippers, operated in a league where most players are black. It was the ideal environment to be careful with your words. Instead, he chose the opposite. In what he believed was a private conversation, he made blatantly racist remarks. He assumed the comments would stay inside four walls. Audio recorders do not share that assumption. The tape spread nationwide. Public outrage moved faster than the internet could track. Fans revolted. Players threatened a walkout. Coaches froze under media pressure. The NBA acted quickly. Sterling received the harshest penalty available, a lifetime ban and a forced sale of the team. It was the sports equivalent of slamming the system reset button. The irony is enormous. Sterling's billionaire career did not fall due to competition or business failure. It collapsed because of the words that came out of his own mouth. One of the rare self-destruct moments in NBA history. 11. Some people learn after the first warning. Some need more time. And then there is golfer Lee Trevino, whom weather itself seemed determined to use as a recurring example for meteorology textbooks. Trevino was known for joking, "If you want to get struck by lightning, just hold up a one iron." For most athletes, that was a joke. For the universe, it was an invitation. Throughout his career, Trevino was struck by lightning 3 times, each following a similar pattern. Storm clouds formed, he stayed on the course, held up a metal club, and nature responded with enthusiastic clarity. The first strike knocked him down, left burns, but he survived. The second happened again near the green, again with a raised club, and again the sky fulfilled its duty. The third time became legend. Rain rolled in, Trevino remained on the course, and lightning seemed to say, "We meet again." The wild part is not that he was struck 3 times, it is because he kept playing. Other golfers fear bunkers. Trevino feared thunderstorms, and thunderstorms probably feared Trevino's persistence. 3 lightning strikes later, he was still standing, proving that luck and stubbornness can occasionally outperform any storm. 12. The music industry is full of risky decisions, but few decisions are so boldly wrong that history itself wants to come back and ask, were you even listening? The story of Decca Records and the Beatles is that moment. In 1962, 4 young men from Liverpool walked into Decca's studio for an audition. They played live. They gave everything. Another band auditioned the same day. After listening, the Decca executives met and delivered their immortal verdict. Guitar groups are on the way out. This statement is so spectacularly miscalculated that if time machines existed, the executives would travel back just to tackle themselves. Decca rejected the Beatles and signed the other band. That band disappeared so fast that even Wikipedia refuses to remember their name. The Beatles signed with EMI instead and became the most influential band of the 20th century. They reshaped music, fashion, pop culture, and the entire recording industry. With every album they released, the phrase, "guitar groups are on the way out," grew more embarrassing. Ever since, Decca has been used in business classes as the perfect case study in historical misfires. Sometimes you do not want to be the person who makes a legendary decision, especially when history keeps quoting your mistake as the punchline. 13. Creativity is wonderful, but creativity that forgets physics becomes a story your neighbors will whisper about every time they see you in the elevator. This time, the main character decided that parachutes are expensive and shirts are plentiful. Apparently, that was enough to start an aviation project. He gathered 25 shirts and tied them into a structure he believed would generate lift. Had NASA engineers seen this design, they would have laughed and then pulled the emergency alarm. But he was not at NASA. He had confidence in a roof high enough to test it. When he jumped, the shirts delivered their collective response instantly. They separated like a group of friends solving a difficult math problem by abandoning each other. The shirts flew with the wind. He descended under the guidance of gravity. Fortunately, his fall ended in a large bush soft enough to prevent him from becoming a biology diagram. He survived with only minor bruises and 0 shirts. A fair trade in the eyes of physics. If there is a takeaway for his next experiment, it is this. Shirts have many uses, but lifting a full-grown adult into the air is not one of them. 14. There are many ways to test scientific knowledge. You can read books, you can consult experts, or if you are Mad Mike Hughes, you can build a homemade steam rocket and launch yourself into the sky to see whether the Earth is flat or curved. This option is reserved exclusively for people deeply committed to their worldview. Hughes was a former limo driver whose belief outperformed any V8 engine. He believed the Earth was flat and wanted first-hand evidence. No labs, no NASA, just a backyard-built rocket and a parachute system he hoped would work at the right time. His earlier tests failed, which Hughes interpreted as polite messages from the universe suggesting minor adjustments. In 2020, he attempted his final launch, aiming to see the Earth's curvature. The rocket blasted upward, too powerfully, and the parachute failed the moment it deployed. There was no safe altitude, no backup system. The rocket fell straight into the California desert. Hughes died on impact. This story is remembered not to mock beliefs, but to acknowledge the extreme conviction of someone willing to launch himself directly into an experiment. Physics, as always, maintained its conclusion. 15. Some people settle conflicts with words. Some use phone calls. And then there is the man in Ukraine who chose to resolve his dispute with a grenade and a car. This is the real-life version of failing to plan is planning to fail. He threw a grenade into his rival's vehicle and shut the door. In a moment so perfectly aligned with Newton's laws that physics professors would applaud, the explosion propelled the car backward toward him. No one expected the plot twist. He became the star of a real-world demonstration of extreme, unintended consequences. The miracle is that he survived. No broken bones, no major injuries, only a racing heartbeat, an unforgettable physics lesson, and a story that Europe would replay for days. The video went viral across the continent. Viewers were stunned and amused. The man became a living example of why, if you want to make a point, you should at least understand the mechanics of what you are doing. Or at minimum, do not stand in front of the car when you throw a grenade. It is the perfect reminder that sometimes things not only go off plan, but produce a comedy moment the entire region will remember. 16. Some stunts make the audience cheer. Some make them scream. Evel Knievel specialized in the rare category that makes people do both at the same time. This jump is the one even action movies would envy. Knievel planned to rocket himself across a canyon using his own sky cycle. He rolled up the ramp, ready to make history with the confidence of a man who trusted both fate and questionable engineering. But the moment he left the launch ramp, the parachute deployed early. Instead of soaring across the canyon, the sky cycle transformed into a giant drifting kite and floated gently toward the canyon floor. The crowd below panicked. Some thought disaster was seconds away. Others could not stop laughing at how absurd the moment looked. Knievel landed safely, stood up like nothing had happened, and carried the same energy as a man saying, "Well, that could have gone worse." It was a perfect demonstration that stunt work does not always follow theory. Sometimes physics takes full control of your landing, and the result is unintentionally hilarious. Knievel became a legend not only for his bravery but for surviving jumps that looked impossible while the audience clutched their hearts and laughed through the shock. 17. History does not always need a battlefield. Sometimes it only needs imagination strong enough to outrun reality. King George IV of the Britain is the perfect example, a man who proudly declared victory in a war he never attended. Standing before Parliament, he announced, "I defeated Napoleon." In reality, he had never set foot on a battlefield. He was simply a king with a storyline so vivid in his head that he mistook it for actual history. Members of Parliament froze. Some tried not to laugh. Others silently questioned whether they had misheard or whether the king was trolling the nation long before trolling existed. He was not lying. He genuinely believed the tale he told himself, and that alone earned him a niche spot in history. The monarch who conquered Napoleon using pure imagination rather than troops, strategy, or combat. George IV's story proves that sometimes all it takes to be remembered is confidence. Not medals, not victories, not campaigns, just the courage to say something bold in public and commit fully to it. 18. Sometimes a book, a comic, or even a superhero can spark national panic. Frederick Wortham is the man who turned that possibility into real legislative action. In the 1950s, Wortham, a psychiatrist, declared that comic books were corrupting America's youth, not mildly influencing them, destroying them. He insisted Batman and Robin were illicit partners. Wonder Woman was morally dangerous, and that colorful comic panels were responsible for society's problems. Congress took him seriously. They held hearings, questioned publishers, and created the Comics Code Authority to censor content. Comic editors looked at each other in disbelief, wondering how harmless adventure stories had escalated into a federal concern. Wortham's claims reshaped the entire industry. Genres disappeared, art styles changed. Superheroes were rewritten to pass strict guidelines. The story shows how a single idea, however questionable, can reshape an entire field if enough people believe it. And every time you see Batman or Wonder Woman today, remember they once stood at the center of a national moral crisis. 19. Some lawsuits sound like they belong in a satire series. Then one day they show up in a real courtroom. The Winnebago case is the classic example. A man driving an RV believed that cruise control was the same as autopilot. He stood up, walked to the back to make coffee, and trusted the vehicle to handle everything. The RV followed the laws of physics. The man survived by luck. Shortly afterward, he sued Winnebago. His argument: the manual did not explicitly warn him that cruise control does not steer the vehicle. The court heard the case. Winnebago's lawyers explained the technology, but the story itself was already too unbelievable and too human to ignore. The lawsuit became legendary in legal classrooms as the perfect case study for misuse liability. Students still laugh at the idea of an RV, a cup of coffee, and a dangerous overconfidence in creating educational material. The lesson is simple. Cruise control is a convenience, not a substitute for a driver. Manuals matter, reality matters more, and sometimes a single bad decision becomes academic history. 20 some moments in history make you squint and ask if the story is real. The assassination attempt on President Andrew Jackson is one of them. A sequence so unbelievable it feels borrowed from an action movie that never passed studio approval. In 1835, Richard Lawrence, a man who clearly watched too many action scenes, attempted to assassinate President Jackson. He pulled out two pistols, pointed them directly at Jackson, and fired. Both guns jammed. Not one bullet left the barrel. Jackson, at 67 years old, did not wait for a third try. Instead of running, he charged at Lawrence and beat him with his cane as if starring in his own historical fight scene. Lawrence ended up bruised and defeated. Jackson walked away unharmed. It sounds ridiculous, but it is a recorded fact. The elderly president used a cane to overpower an assassin armed with modern weapons. The kind of scene that reminds you that reality can be more absurd than fiction. This moment proves something simple. Modern weapons do not always beat reflexes, stubbornness, and a very motivated old man with a cane. 21. Some people experiment with science at home, and some people make safety regulations want to retire early. The man in this story definitely never read the microwave manual. He looked at the unused fireworks in his hand and thought, I should dry these in the microwave so they'll explode prettier. No one knows why he believed this was a good idea, but his confidence outperformed logic by a wide margin. Seconds later, his kitchen turned into a small action film set. The microwave caught fire. The counter shook. Smoke poured out. Even the neighbors felt a light tremor. He managed to escape, but the lesson in physics, combustion, and appliance limitations was unforgettable. The story spread quickly. People were horrified and amused at the same time, realizing that 1 minute of personal research can turn a kitchen into a Hollywood disaster scene. This is living proof that home science is not always a great idea, especially when microwaves and fireworks end up in the same sentence. 22. Some people believe money alone can control the world. Nelson and William Hunt of Texas proved that overconfidence can be extremely expensive. In 1979, the brothers decided they were not rich enough. Instead of buying more luxury cars or mansions, they tried to buy all the physical silver and futures contracts on the market. Their logic was simple. If we own everything, we become the silver kings. At first, the plan seemed to work. Silver prices soared. The financial world held its breath watching two billionaires approach total control of a precious metal. But they forgot one rule. Markets rewrite the rules when they feel threatened. Exchanges and regulators stepped in, changed trading limits, and the entire scheme collapsed. Silver prices crashed. The brothers lost more than $1 billion and nearly shook the U.S. economy. The Hunt brothers saga is still taught in finance as a legendary cautionary tale. Ambition plus overconfidence can turn you from market king to market punchline very quickly. 23. There are moments when scientific ambition turns into a homemade horror movie. The man in this story decided to test his fireproof jacket in a way that safety manuals would only respond to with silence and disappointment. He was convinced his new self-made jacket could withstand flames. Instead of testing it on a sample or a mannequin, he chose the direct method. He poured gasoline on himself, put the jacket on, and believed this was the fastest way to prove his invention worked. The outcome was exactly what physics teachers expect. The jacket was not fireproof. Flames spread instantly, turning the room into a real-life Hollywood explosion. He survived and ended up in the hospital with a very clear lesson. Confidence in your product means nothing if you do not respect physics. The story spread quickly. It became both a warning and a punchline. People were shocked, amused, and confused about how he ever thought this was a safe test. It is proof that home science experiments are not always a good idea, especially when gasoline is involved and you are convinced your fireproof jacket is the perfect version. A painful but unforgettable lesson for anyone who loves innovation with a side of recklessness. 24 medical history is full of strange moments, but few match the day Dr. Thomas Harvey examined Einstein's body and decided to take the genius's brain home without permission. After the autopsy, Harvey removed Einstein's brain, placed it in jars, and kept it for 40 years. He moved states, changed jobs, and carried the brain with him like a bizarre national treasure. He did not study it immediately. Occasionally, he sliced tiny samples and mailed them to curious researchers, convinced the secret of genius was hidden in those fragments. While the world honored Einstein through theories and books, Harvey treated his brain like a personal collectible. The story became famous because of how surreal it was. A respected doctor turned the most famous brain in the world into private home decor. If Einstein had known, he might have sighed and wondered why his brain traveled more miles after his death than he ever did while alive. 25. Some government decisions confuse citizens, wildlife, and anyone with a functioning sense of logic. The mayor of a small town in Louisiana definitely knew how to create a moment people would never forget. In an attempt to discipline the local alligators, he decided to hang them from trees. His reason? The alligators needed punishment for their behavior in the town's waters. Residents stood there in disbelief, trying to explain that alligators do not respond to consequences, moral lessons, or municipal warnings. As expected, the alligators did not care at all. The images spread quickly, and the whole country reacted with the same mixture of laughter and confusion. Was this animal management or the mayor's personal performance art project? Locals had to reassure everyone that while the mayor tried to enforce rules, the alligators simply continued living their reptile lives without concern. The story is a reminder that even well-intentioned government decisions can become comedy. Nature has its own laws, and sometimes those laws do not include listening to city officials. This is a lesson in wildlife management, political oddities, and the endless patience of the people watching. 26. When people say dream big, Larry Walters clearly took that advice extremely literally. He decided to fly into the sky using a lawn chair and 45 helium balloons. His goal was simple: enjoy the view from above. His plan felt safe in his imagination. One chair, some snacks, and 45 balloons. No one expected him to drift directly into the flight path of Los Angeles International Airport. Commercial pilots who spotted him must have thought they had accidentally entered a comedy movie with real consequences. Larry rose to 16,000 feet. He floated, sipped soda, and admired California while air traffic controllers scrambled to warn commercial pilots about a man in a flying lawn chair. He eventually landed safely on power lines and then on an empty field. No one was injured, no planes were hit, but the story became a national legend about boldness, imagination, and the perfect amount of chaos needed to be remembered forever. If there is a lesson, it is this: when you mix helium with patio furniture, anything can become an aviation event. Larry Walters proved that sometimes a dream of flight only requires one chair and 45 balloons. 27. History can be so absurd that you question whether the story is real or a joke passed down for centuries. The conflict between the Dutch and the Spanish in the 16th century is one of those moments. Both armies planned a surprise attack at dawn, hoping to gain the upper hand. Instead, the entire operation collapsed because the soldiers and commanders overslept. By the time they woke up, the opportunity had passed and the battle evaporated. No strategy failed, no ambush unfolded. Both sides simply slept through history. The tale survived because of its perfect absurdity. A major clash was canceled not by weather, diplomacy, or divine intervention, but by the human need for sleep. Historians still retell it as proof that sometimes the survival of nations depends on luck and an alarm clock. It is a moment that reminds us history is not just grand battles. Sometimes it is two armies snoring in a field and accidentally creating a temporary peace. 28. Sometimes one phone call can destroy an entire career, and Donald Sterling is permanent evidence of that. This incident has been retold many times, but it deserves a spot here because of how shockingly fast everything fell apart. Sterling, the owner of the LA Clippers, believed a private conversation would stay private. In a call with his girlfriend, he made clearly racist comments and assumed no one else would ever hear them. Reality disagreed. The recording leaked, spread across the country, and ignited outrage from fans, players, and the entire sports world. The NBA responded with unprecedented speed. Sterling was banned for life, forced to sell the team, and became a cautionary tale that phones and social media never forget. He did not lose on the court or through business failures. He ended his career with his own voice. The story lives on because it perfectly illustrates how, in sports, you do not always need an opponent. One call, one moment of arrogance in history will remember you for the wrong reason. 29. Urban planning is usually a serious field, but sometimes it produces decisions that make you wonder who approved the idea. Robert Moses, New York's most powerful planner, is a prime example. He built bridges low enough that buses could not pass under them. The reason was not architecture or budget. His intention was to prevent low-income families and black communities from accessing certain beaches and parks. It was discrimination executed through infrastructure, both subtle and absurd. Residents and journalists were stunned. The story spread as a symbol of how power mixed with bad judgment can turn public works into bizarre acts of policy. Today, Moses's bridges still stand, and they serve as a reminder that city planning is not just concrete and steel. It is also the reflection of someone's values, or the lack of them. It remains one of the worst planning decisions in American history, where justice and bus access were both blocked by a bad idea. 30. Some ideas make you ask, who thought this was smart? This is one of them. A man decided to bake a pastry using an iron. His logic: it would save electricity. He placed the dough between the iron plates, turned the heat to high, and waited for a miracle. No miracle arrived. The pastry burned black. The iron smoked like it was quitting its job. And the entire kitchen nearly turned into a live-action disaster scene. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt, but the lesson was immediate. Creativity does not replace physics. Heat, time, and electrical safety are not optional. The story spread quickly as a comedy and a cautionary tale. People laughed and shook their heads, wondering how anyone could mistake an iron for an oven. It remains proof that some attempts to save energy can cost far more. But at least you get a funny story to tell for years.